Now for our roundtable with our longtime News Channel 5 political analyst, Brian Crowley. Brian, thanks as always for being with us. Talk about the juxtaposition we have here. We've got Super Tuesday coming up. Florida's not part of that. We have our primary March 19th, but you have the two biggest prizes, California and Texas, up for grabs, among many others. Super Tuesday, the former president, Donald Trump, big event at Mar-a-Lago that night. And yet, at the same time, late last week in Fort Pierce, waiting to see what's going to happen in terms of the timing of that trial ultimately and the other trials he faces. Remarkable and historic times we see right now as we juxtapose that and where it takes us as we move toward November.
Well, there appears to be no doubt that he's going to be the nominee. You know, Nikki Haley and to some degree Ron DeSantis, who are hoping that he'll fall over a chair and then one of the two of them gets to be the nominee, seems less and less likely. And in the middle of all of this, we have, as we've said many times, this unusual, to put it mildly, election cycle where we have a potentially indicted Republican nominee. You know, weird things are happening in the courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, which is deciding the immunity case, whether or not a president has total immunity. They are not going to hear that until April 22nd, I believe the date is. And then at some point after that, they will make their decision. One analyst noted that in making a critical Supreme Court decision about Richard Nixon, they did it in, I think it was 49 days. These guys are taking months of something that is absolutely critical to this election. I know the Supreme Court justices are busy, but I think they could speed things up a little bit and give voters in the nation a chance to know where they're going and where we're going with this.
Biden, Trump, Florida. Some years ago, we would have said huge drama in a battleground state. But you've been saying for years, don't expect that here this year necessarily. Never say never, but.
Well, and again, very weird election year, and I don't like to predict things because it's weird. You know, the Republicans have added 800,000 people to their voter registration lead over the Democrats, an extraordinary number that nobody would have dreamed about even 4 or 5 years ago. This is a very red state. DeSantis is slightly wounded as the Republican leader of this state, but he's far from gone. And I think Joe Biden has a very small chance of succeeding in Florida. The critical thing about that is 30 electoral votes. If you're not getting them here, you have to make them up somewhere else.
Yep, third biggest prize after, tied for third, I think, with New York, or slightly ahead, but you got Florida, California, Texas,
and Florida.
Yeah, and the big three, and then New York right there as well. So excellent point. If you're not going to grab that big prize, where do you go to get it?
We have slightly over 10% of the electoral votes needed to win.
Talk about it. One of the things I love, you old news dog, is that, of course, it used to be with phones and slips of paper, but now I see you scanning the phone with some breaking news even as we were sitting here talking. Take it away.
Well, last Friday, the University of Florida announced that they were immediately firing the members of their diversity, equity, and inclusion departments. And not only were they firing them, but they were also immediately getting rid of any contractors who were involved with that. You know, no matter how one feels on that issue, these are, in a sense, innocent people who got hired to do a job who all of a sudden on Friday found out they were out of work. And maybe they have families to take care of. And I think part of what I thought was an unusual thing coming out of the governor's office was moments after that happened, the press secretary sends out a copy of the press release, Jeremy Redfern, and puts a big W over it for win. You know, you don't need to torment people who already, they weren't doing anything wrong. They got hired to do a job. The job, they're not even, is immediately over on Friday. And for the governor's office to gloat, I just, you know, it's not necessary.
What else is top of mind? I know you get asked all the time by people who see you and say, Brian, legislatively, at the local, state level, certainly national politics we talk about all the time. What are in your political commentary sites right now?
Well, you know, we're going to be talking about the March 19th elections, the city elections that we're going to have in Palm Beach County and in the rest of the state. One of the interesting things about that is that the Republican Party of Palm Beach County has worked very aggressively over the last 6 or 7 months to recruit candidates, to work with the candidates. They are very determined that they're going to essentially take over as many of these cities as they can. Democratic effort in Palm Beach County has not been as strong, so we'll see what happens. But the Democratic Party used to be able to count on Palm Beach County, and it's looking less and less like that's going to be able to happen. We'll know more on March 19th.
How do you end up out in the political wilderness? And I know Democrats would say we're not, but any objective observer says as you look at the state of Florida politics, out in the wilderness for a generation now.
Well, I think that one of the things...
more than a generation,
yeah,
really.
I think one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about Florida is that Florida, was Southern Democrats. A lot of them were already conservative. And you started to see a big shift toward the Republicans in the 60s when you had the Civil Rights Act was passed, when we were forced to integrate schools. Conservative Democrats started moving toward the Republican Party. And then it started happening in waves around the time that Jeb Bush won election. We had two Republican governors, Claude Kirk in the 60s and Mel Martinez in the 80s. But Jeb Bush helped turn the tide significantly in this state, and it's been a tsunami ever since.
Brian, as always, we appreciate the historical perspective and the breaking news there as well, my friend. We'll be back.
How old I am, that's right.
All the modern tools with this guy. We'll be back with more in just a moment.